Well, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Congratulations on finishing up your finals week. I know that was probably really stressful, so we're also proud of you guys. And if you have any questions during this, please feel free to stop me and ask, because we're really here for you guys and want to make this as easy and make sure we get all your questions answered. So my name is Mackenzie Maloney. I'm a first-year medical student here at MCG, and tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the medical school application process. So the path to medical school is very long. There's a lot of steps in between. So no matter where you are on your journey on this timeline, we hope to help you guys through the process. And I'm sorry if this is a repeat of information for any of you that might be a little bit closer to applying, and for any freshmen that are with us, hopefully this kind of helps you plan out some things that can help strengthen your application and make you a competitive applicant. So this is a great infographic from the AAMC that kind of gives you a brief overview of some things that you can be doing throughout your undergraduate career to help make you be the best applicant that you can be. Tonight, we're really going to focus on 6 through 9, which is getting registered for the MCAT, and then what the interview process, the application process looks like for medical school. So let's talk about what are some steps to applying to medical school. Some of you may have heard of the MCAT. That is the entrance exam to medical school. It's kind of like the ACT or the SAT to get into college. So everybody has to take it. And then if any of you use the common application to apply for undergraduate school, that's kind of what the primary application is like for medical school. It's one application that gets sent to all of the schools that you're applying to. And then after that, the schools that you apply to can send you a secondary application, which allows you to respond to essay prompts that they've selected and give them a little bit more information about you and why you want to go to that school. After that, if they think that you would be a good fit for their school, they would extend an invitation to interview with them. And we'll talk a little bit later about what the different types of interviews are. And then after you interview, your application will be reviewed and you'll receive a decision. So there's 3 things that you can hear back from medical school, kind of like undergrad. You can either say, congratulations, you've been accepted. You can have a, congratulations, we think you're a great fit, but we don't have a spot for you right now, so we've put you on the waiting list, and hopefully you'll get a spot a little bit later on in the application cycle, or a thank you so much, please try and apply with us again next year. So what is on the primary application? Like I said, you're going to be using kind of a common application, and so that is done through AMCAS. And this is kind of a picture of what the AMCAS website looks like. I have this linked in the notes, so we'll make this PowerPoint presentation available to you guys so it's all easy and linked for you all. With this common app, the only schools that are not using AMCAS are Texas schools, so I have a link for their application in the notes section on this page as well. But those would be your only 2 primary applications that you would have to submit, which makes it nice. You only have to put this stuff in once. So the parts of the primary application include your transcript from undergrad, your MCAT score or scores, your current class schedule if you are a senior when you're applying, your personal statement, which is an essay that kind of says why you want to go into medicine, and then you'll have a letters of recommendation section, and you can submit 3 to 5 letters of recommendation. Each school has a different requirement, so you'll have to check and make sure what that particular school is requiring. Most schools, though, require at least one of those letters to be from a science professor from your undergraduate school. Additionally, the experiences section we'll talk a little bit more in depth about. And then the last section of your primary application is the school selection, which is the most fun because you're getting to pick where you want to apply. And then in addition to this primary application through AMCAS, you'll complete a CASPER interview, and we'll show you what that looks like as well. Okay, so we're going to go through a couple of these things. Some medical schools have required coursework that you'll do in your undergraduate career, which is what you guys have been working so hard to complete. So these are just two examples: Medical College of Georgia and the St. Louis University School of Medicine, and what their required courses are. Every school requires different courses, and I have a link on this page to a list of all the schools and what they require and recommend if there's a school that you're aiming for in particular. So this can be really helpful if you're a freshman to kind of help plan out what classes you should be taking. It's kind of a safe blanket statement to say that most schools require biology, some sort of English, chemistry, and physics. And then most schools from there also require organic chemistry. So check it out because every school is different. I thought it was interesting. St. Louis required inorganic chemistry. So you want to make sure that you're checking those boxes as you move through your undergraduate career. Okay, so the experiences section. I think that this is the most important section of your application. After you check all those boxes like GPA and MCAT score, this is really where you get to show your personality and what you've been doing your whole undergraduate career. I know that you guys have all been juggling a lot, you've been doing a lot, so this is kind of your time to shine and show them who you are. This is a list of some of the things that you can include in experiences. It's like a drop-down box, and then you select what that experience was, and then you get to write a little something about it. So I had something for all of these except for two. There could be more on that drop-down list, but this is what I pulled up for my old application. So stuff like your research, any posters that you did with research, your shadowing experience, leadership, community service, employment, athletics, hobbies, etc. So you'll get up to 15 entries. You don't have to use them all by any means, but you can. It's there for you to tell them what you guys have been up to. And then after you do your entries, you can select 3 as your most meaningful, and you get an extra 1,300 characters to talk about them. Okay, so I mentioned the Casper exam earlier. It's not done through AMCAS, it's done through Casper, and I just screenshotted this from their website. This is just a small recorded section of the application. And so they give you like a little prompt, and then you have X amount of time to respond to questions about that prompt. And it's typically ethical questions and trying to see how you would respond in those situations. So kind of a low stakes thing. It's not like an interview. There's nobody on the other screen. You're just recording yourself answering these questions. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, so that is what your primary application looks like. Now we're going to talk about the second step, your secondary application. These are school specific. So you'll get one pretty much for every place that you apply to. Each school is going to have essays on there, and they can be anything from like, why do you want to go to their school, or what makes you a good fit? Describe a time when you were challenged. All those great essay prompts could be on there. There's resources linked on this page that take you to example prompts that you can kind of draft or think about while you're waiting for these secondary applications to come to you. I want to make a note that each secondary application will have its own due date. So these are school specific, like I said. Some of them could be due within 2 weeks of getting them, like MCG. Other ones, it could be pretty much for the whole application cycle. So you could have months to work on them. I would suggest as you get these, you submit them back in a timely fashion, especially if schools have rolling admission, because you want to keep your application towards the top of that pile. And a lot of schools I read on Kaplan say that your application isn't really complete until that secondary application comes in. So you want to make sure that your application is getting reviewed towards the beginning of the application cycle to help give you the best chance possible. So the next step in the application process would be having an interview. If you are extended an invitation to interview, the school will send you a link to your email saying, congratulations, we'd love to learn more about you, and please follow this link to schedule your interview. So it's kind of on your own timeline. You get to pick what day you interview. So pick something that works for your schedule. I think I had one interview after I had fall finals. So that was really convenient for me. It was the only thing that was on my mind. So pick something that works in your schedule and that you can focus your energy on it. So there's two different types of interviews. There's a traditional style interview, which is one-on-one with you and an interviewer, and it's kind of a more organic question and answer session. You don't have any particular prompts, but they might just say, like, tell me more about you. Why do you like this school? What are some of your goals? And just kind of having a conversation with somebody about, your aspirations. This is a really exciting time, I think, the interview process. So I had one traditional style interview, and it was two one-on-one interviews that were 25 minutes each. One was with the student and one was with the professor. So that was just my experience. Schools can pick whatever type of interview they want. So it'll be specific to that school that you're applying to. A lot of schools now have moved towards the multiple mini interview style, which is a lot of fun too. I had a couple of these, and they can be either like a recorded session, kind of like your Casper was, or it could be with an interviewer in person or on Zoom, depending on how the pandemic is going. And they're typically about 8 stations long, 6 minutes a station, and you'd have a different interviewer for each station. And you'll get a prompt before entering the interview room, and you'll have a minute to think about it. And then you respond to that prompt when you're in the room. So these could be anything from a why medicine question, which is kind of a traditional interview style question, to paper folding was one that could be asked. Additionally, it could be something like a role play, like you're in a group project and someone isn't pulling their weight and your team is getting frustrated. You are about to walk in the room and have a conversation with that team member. So then you would go in and pretend like that's your team member, and you would have a mock conversation with them. So those are the different types of interviews that you could have. And then interview days, it's really fun. It's really about you trying to decide if that school is a good fit for you, as much as it is them trying to decide if you'd be a good fit at their school. So you get a tour of campus. There'll be presentations about curriculum, what campus life is like. They'll have a finances session, scholarship information, and then you might get to interact with current students, have a session with them, and get to ask them what their candid opinions are or things that they really like, etc. I'm going to check the chat. No, interviews are not a guaranteed part of the process. So after reviewing your primary and your secondary application, you may or may not get an interview. You could get a letter at that point saying, thank you so much for thank you so much for applying this year, but you did not get an interview. And that's not uncommon. So please don't get discouraged. I would say the majority of schools I applied to, I did not get an interview for. So that is very typical, but hopefully you guys all have interviews. So we've kind of covered these steps. You have to take the MCAT, which is the entrance exam. We talked about the different parts of the primary application, kind of what secondary applications are, what interviews are, and then you'd receive a decision either after your interview or the secondary application. So I think you guys all guessed from the infographic on the second slide that the path to applying to medical school is a long one. So let's talk a little bit about what the timeline looks like. So I made this little chart as if I was a junior here at Augusta, planning to go to medical school after I graduate and not take a gap year. So I think these dates are correct. I'm sorry if they're not, but you can adjust them for whenever you plan to graduate and when you want to start medical school. I think it's easiest to plan your application cycle in reverse. So I have this in the reverse of kind of how we've been going over things. In all the application cycle, if you include your time to study for the MCAT, take the MCAT, do all your applications, hopefully interviews, and then start medical school, that's about 1.5 years. So if I was a junior here at Augusta and I was planning to go directly into medical school, that would be July of 2023, which means that I would need to take the MCAT about 1 year before that. So between January and September of 2022. And then you ideally start studying 6 months before that. Does anyone have any questions about that? I know that can be kind of confusing. Okay. And then if you were planning to take a gap year or you don't get in the first time and so you're going to apply a second round, Hannah did a wonderful webinar on things that you can do in your gap year. So definitely be sure to check out that information. It's on D2L. This is just another way of thinking about the medical school application process in terms of time, because a lot of the different parts kind of are happening at the same time, they overlap. So this is something that came from Kaplan. They suggest taking the MCAT at some point December to September, but ideally you want to do it in spring of your junior year. I suggest taking it in May because you can finish your finals and then have a couple weeks of really focused MCAT studying right before you take it, and then your scores will come back before they release the primary applications to be reviewed by schools. So then you have your primaries and your secondaries that are kind of happening on a rolling basis there. Of course, your primary has to be in first before you get your secondary, and then secondaries can overlap with interviews. And then sometime in March, April, you'd hopefully have a couple decisions. But if you're on a wait list, you might not know that you've gotten a spot or not until June. So this is a example for Medical College of Georgia, just another way to think about this or present the material. So the earliest day to submit the primary application was May 27th, but the medical college didn't actually start looking at them until July 1st. So if you submit your primary application early, that's awesome, but they won't look at it until July 1st. You absolutely have to submit by November 1st to be considered. And then they would send out the secondary application at some point after you've submitted your primary. And MCG's deadline for returning it is 2 weeks after you get your secondary. And then you might receive an interview invitation, at which point they have a calendar. You would select a day that works best for you, have your interview, and then the start of class would be July 25th. So that was when I started medical school here, because this is last year's application cycle. This is the current list of MCAT days that you can take. So this is linked at the bottom in the notes section. And then over here on the right, it says score release, which I think is something that you might want to keep in mind as you're selecting a day to take the MCAT, because your primary won't get submitted until your MCAT score comes back. So you can work on your primary and submit it, but it won't actually get sent out to schools until your MCAT score comes back. So just keep that in mind as you're applying and what your timeline will look like. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, so this is kind of the last piece of the primary application, which is selecting a medical school. And I think that this is kind of the fun part, so I put it at the end. I think anywhere you guys end up going will be fantastic, and it's really just a personal choice of what works best for you. So some things to consider when choosing your medical schools would be, where is it located? Is it more of like a rural-based school or not? Sorry, I'm going to take a look at the chat before I get too far into this. Yes, so medical schools do allow you to send updates about your application with extracurriculars and grades. So if you haven't heard anything and it's getting close to the end of fall semester, I would go ahead and send an update. You'll just add it to your application later on or email that school's representative to do that. And I think that is helpful and helps keep it fresh in that academic committee's mind. Are there such things as MCAT fee waivers? Yes, there are. So I would take a look at the AMCAS website. They also have fee waivers for the application, the primary application, and the secondaries. So I'm sorry, I did not link that information, but on the last slide, there is a link to the AMCAS website, and you should be able to find all of that on there. Sorry. Okay, so where to apply, things to consider when you're trying to pick a medical school location, is a big one. Is it rural? Is it a larger teaching hospital? Can be important in deciding what kind of medical school you want to go to. Additionally, the cost, as we already mentioned, the fee waivers, cost can be a big one. What kinds of scholarships do they accept or extend, etc. Different program lengths and offerings. So MCG has a 3-year program, but a lot of schools are 4. You can do just your medical doctor degree, but you can also do programs that are MD, PhD, where you do research and you also get your PhD during that time. There's other ones that have like Masters of Public Health, or you can get your MBA, which is Masters of Business Associate. So there's a lot of different combined programs nowadays that if you're interested in, I would definitely look and see what that application process looks like, because I think it might be a little bit different if you're applying for both programs to start with, or if that's something that you would then apply for once you're there. Or I think even on AMCAS, you can select which program you'd like to apply to. So just stuff to look into if you're interested about it. Additionally, I think looking at the average MCAT score and the GPA of the current student body can also be really helpful in trying to gauge what your chances are of getting into a school, because if you're not hitting those marks, you might not get to the interview process, and it's always a balance between cost of applying and casting a wide net there. So that is something to consider as you guys are selecting how many schools you want to apply to. Additionally, how big is their program? Is it 60 students or 200? And trying to figure out what kind of program suits you, if you like to have a big class or you like it to be smaller. And then we got another question about cost, if there's any government financial aid like Hope or Zell for medical school. I do think that if you're from Georgia and you did not use up all of your financial aid from those programs, that you can use it towards medical school. But that would be, if you have financial questions, I would reach out to those schools, and a lot of them do have that information on their websites, but it's going to be more school specific. Some other things to think about might be what their mission statement is. If serving the underserved is really important to you, maybe you want to pick a school that aligns with your missions. Additionally, curriculum. We have a more condensed curriculum here, which I'll talk about on the next slide, or you might prefer a little bit more traditional program. So these are all just factors to think about as you're deciding. And then the last item I have on here is the match list. And this is if you've always dreamed about being a particular kind of doctor and you're really set on it, and you're kind of already gearing up towards residency and the steps beyond medical school, you might want to take a peek at what that school's match list is, if they've had people match in whatever specialty you're really interested in. And then also see if they have like a great residency program for that or something, if you're already thinking ahead a couple of steps. So that might be something to think about as well. So this is kind of a schematic of MCG's curriculum. I mentioned that we're a little bit different. So we do our whole pre-clerkship, which is basically the book work and learning about how the body works. We do that in 18 months, and it's more traditional to do that in 24 months, so 2 years. So this is what our curriculum kind of looks like. So we go integrated body systems, and we spend so much time on, you'll see like the cardiopulmonary system. So we learn about disease state at the same time that we learn about, how does a healthy body work? And that's just one type of curriculum. So if curriculum is something that is really important to you and you think you would learn best doing a particular thing, I would definitely take a peek at that as you're looking to choose schools. And they'll have more information about curriculum on your interview day, and most schools have that information on their websites. So the last thing I had in these slides is just a link to the AAMC website. They have so many resources on there. It doesn't matter where you are on your path, on your journey to medical school, even beyond, there's information for residents. So I think it's really helpful. There's materials for everything from interviews to fee waivers to the MCAT. They've got practice questions. It's great. So I just put the checklist medical school on here as an example. Okay, I know that was a lot of information, you guys. Does anyone have any questions? I'll put it back on our steps to applying page. Okay, great question. So what number of clinical volunteering and shadowing hours would you say is a very strong amount? So there's no set number of hours that you have to have. I think the more the merrier. I would at least try to have 20. I think that is a pretty reasonable amount. If you go shadow over Christmas break or summer break, you could do that in 2 or 3 days. So just the more the better. Variety is great because there's so many specialties out there. I think it's wonderful to explore as you're an undergrad and also get mentors through that. I highly recommend as much as you can get. And any advice for how to talk about your experiences in your personal statement? As you're going and you're shadowing and you're volunteering, I'd make little notes. I'd have a notebook. And if there was a particularly moving patient or encounter or something a doctor said, I'd write it down. So that way I could kind of weave it into my personal statement. I talked a little bit about a young girl who had a bunch of brain surgery and wasn't really able to have autonomy over her healthcare, and kind of the way that that moved me. So I think kind of just weaving that into your personal statement and about sharing why you love medicine and why it's exciting and why you want to be an advocate for people. I think that that is a good way to kind of weave that in there. How do you get to be accepted as a Harrison Scholar? I'm not sure, Krishna. I'm really sorry. I think that there's an MCAT requirement, a grades requirement, and there might also be some income parameters there. But I think if you just Google it, it would be there. I'm sorry, I'm not too familiar with it. Where do you take the Casper exam again, and is it during your junior year? So you'll take your Casper exam on the Casper website, and it'll probably be sent as a link to you from AMCAS. Once you submit your primary application, they'll say you are applying to schools that require the Casper exam. Not every school requires it, but MCG is one that does. So do be aware of that. If you're applying to schools that require the Casper exam, they'll let you know and send you a link to do it. I think I did it fall of my senior year after I had submitted my primary. As a junior, would it be okay for me to take the MCAT next August and have it back before the applications? Absolutely. As a junior, so you would take it your fall of your senior year. Absolutely. Take it in August. Get your studying in, and then I would also be working on your primary application over the summer, because you can be working on that before you take the MCAT. So that way, as soon as those scores come back, they get sent out, because a lot of schools are on that rolling admission. So you want to kind of be seen in the pile as early as you can. But I wouldn't stress about if that's the only time you can take it. Just do your best on the MCAT and on your application, and it's totally okay. I don't think I had my primary submitted until August, even though I took my MCAT in May. So I definitely wouldn't worry about it. Don't make it a stressful thing. How many credits should I be taking a semester just to make sure I'm on track? I think if you're somewhere around 12 to 15, you should be on track. So you want to kind of make sure you get your biologies, your chemistries, your organic chemistry, and your physics in before you take your MCAT, because those are all things that can be tested. I think it's also recommended that you get like cell biology, maybe statistics, psychology. Those are all things that are helpful but aren't required. So I would definitely be talking to your academic advisor about what they recommend, and then be looking to see what schools require that you're interested in, to make sure that you're checking all those boxes. And then summer semesters are great. I really recommend them as well. You can take some classes over the summer if you want to take less during the school year. You want to take more recommended classes too. Okay, great. So which courses will be helpful to have completed before taking the MCAT? So your basic biologies, your basic general chemistry, your organic chemistry, physics, psychology. They also have sociology questions on the MCAT, so that's helpful. I think that cell bio and microbio would also be helpful, not required. So those are good ones. And then I think we have some resources linked on the D2L pages as well for the MCAT Anki. And I think that that would be a really helpful tool to use as well. Any helpful tips for studying? Yes, don't procrastinate. Your undergraduate classes are helping you be prepared for the MCAT. So just study regularly for your normal classes. If you're early on in that process, if you're a freshman, kind of keeping up with stuff as you go. And then I mentioned the MCAT Anki. There's resources for that on D2L for you guys. So I definitely take a look into that. So that way you can be keeping up with that material over your time. And then in that 6 months that I was talking about that are ideal to start studying for the MCAT, we have MCAT books for you guys that you can rent out. And I would really recommend renting out those books during that 6 months and kind of working through all the practice questions and kind of hitting that high yield material again. There's classes out there that you can buy through study companies like Kaplan. I think Princeton Review also has some, but there's also free material that is on the AMCAS website. So you can take free practice exams, there's free focused questions. So that could also be a great resource if you don't check out our MCAT books through the MMOMP, or you don't get a separate study course. So that's what I would recommend. Oh, about how many essays are required from MCG? I think there was 5 essays maybe that were required, and then 2 or 3 optional ones, because COVID happened right during our kind of application process. There was some optional places to talk about how COVID had impacted our path to medical school. I would guess that you guys would have that section as well, just because it has been a big impact, especially getting people shadowing in the clinic and things. So those might be an option, but it varies. I mean, some schools I had 2, some were closer to 7 or 8. Some are not that long, like 500 words or something. So I wouldn't stress out too much about them. These are great questions, you guys. Do you have any other ones? If you think of anything else, you can always email any of your mentors or myself, Mackenzie Maloney. So we're here for you guys. I know that this can be overwhelming. When should you start clinical experience? Now. It doesn't matter where you are on your path to applying. I think clinical experience is wonderful. It can really help you guys decide early on what you want to do, or just get exposure, see different bedside manners, and kind of pick up little pearls or mentors along the way. It's never too late, and it's never too early. So if an interview is given, we're in the clear. No. Oh, I wish. Everyone is so amazing. You guys have been working so hard. Everyone's got kind of all the boxes checked. So it is competitive. You could not receive a secondary to a school, or if you do receive a secondary, it's possible that you won't be given an interview. And then even after the interview, they do kind of have to decide who they'll give a spot to or who gets on the wait list. But I really wouldn't be discouraged if you guys get rejected anywhere, if you're on the wait list anywhere, because people get in off the wait list all the time. Some of the best advice that I heard about if you do get rejected and that was like your dream school and you're going to wait and you're going to reapply is email that school. You'll have emails for the contacts over there. So email the admissions committee and ask them, what can you do in the next year to make yourself a more competitive applicant? Because they want us all to become doctors. They want us all to be the best doctors that we can be, healthcare professionals. So they're going to be your advocate. I wouldn't really view medical schools as being like a scary thing. They're there to help you. So I would email them and ask them, ways that you could strengthen and hopefully get in the next round. So if you do not receive an interview, do you have to start the application process again? So you're going to be applying most likely to more than one school. So if you don't receive an interview to a particular school, your application process with that school is over, but you'll still have that application process with other schools. If you reach the end of the application cycle and unfortunately you haven't gotten in anywhere and term has already started, then, I would start preparing for the next round. And it's pretty typical for people to have to apply more than once. So don't be discouraged. Use that as an opportunity to gain more clinical experience, maybe get a job as a scribe at a doctor's office so that you can make money and also get clinical experience. Talk to those schools that you're really interested in, see what kind of things you can add to your resume. You could take a year and do research with somebody, hopefully get some publications done. Hannah talked a lot about gap years in the past, so that information is all on D2L as well. But does that answer your question? Okay, good. Is sending your MCAT to score to schools free, and does the score expire? I think sending your scores is free. I would have to double check. And your score does expire. I think your score is good for 5 years. So even if you are planning to take a gap year, I would suggest taking the MCAT close to the time that you graduate or at some point in your junior to senior year, just so that material is fresh, because I think the longer you're not studying that stuff, it would get harder and harder to take. And then use your score before it expires, and then just study again if you need to retake it, if your score does expire. So I think to expand a little bit more, because there's been several questions about fees, and the stuff you have to pay for, to the best of my knowledge, is your AMCAS. Every school that you select adds a cost. So your primary application costs money, and then your secondary, each secondary is somewhere in the range of $75 to $100 per secondary application, which is why I think it's important to kind of decide how many schools you're going to send your application to. And then if you think that that school is a good fit for you and you're kind of in their range of MCAT and GPA scores as well, because I'm not saying you wouldn't get in without those things, but it's always a balance between how much does it cost and how wide to cast your net. Anything else, you guys? I hope this was helpful. I know it's confusing, and as you guys think about the process, how long is the rolling period for admissions at MCG? So at MCG, let's see, MCG's process, if you look at it here, they start looking at primary applications July 1st, and then they'll send out whether or not you've gotten in sometime around March, I believe. But then if you're on the wait list, you could not hear until the end of June or early July whether or not you got a spot off the wait list. we can have another session on how it kind of looks like on the back end of if you've been accepted to a medical school. It gets a little bit complicated and I don't want to overwhelm you guys, but people can hold their spot at a school and turn it down until June. So you could get in off the wait list at the end of June, early July. So that is kind of an idea of how long that rolling process is for admissions. But because that primary application deadline is November 1st, they won't have any more from November 1st, and then they finish up their interviews around March. So they kind of have their final admissions meeting sometime in March and then send out those sometime in May. Anybody else? You're welcome. I know that it's confusing. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of resources out there. So please, as you guys are working through the process, if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or your mentors. We're here to help you guys and try to help guide you through the process. Congratulations on finishing your semester. Enjoy your winter break. You guys have deserved it. And look forward to seeing you guys again next time.